To better help you guys navigate my content as I approach the triple-digit upload count, I have created 3 playlists to help you better find what you're looking for. One playlist is for my critical thought and discussion pieces for those who want my more deep analytical takes. The second is for drama content if you're like me and enjoy some good pointless slop every now and then. And the last playlist is any content involving another person I am actively talking with. Primarily, gacha pulling videos with my brother. Not all of my videos are in these 3 playlists, but I hope this nonetheless helps you guys better navigate my content. And with that out of the way, it's time for me to navigate all these dog shit roguelite modes. The roguelike, or some might say the rogue-lite genre, has been around for a while now in the games industry, with popular variations on the genre with games like The Binding of Isaac, Enter the Gungeon, and Risk of Rain 2 to name a few. But let's be serious here for a moment. None of these games came close to the level of mainstream breakout appeal of the genre we've seen in recent memory until we witnessed the release of Hades from Supergiant Games. Originally available for Steam Early Access in December 2018, and finally officially releasing in September of 2020. Since its release, its influence on specifically gacha game design has become very clear among the big 4, as well as a few smaller gacha titles and some upcoming ones we've yet to get our hands on. Honkai Impact 3rd being the earliest example I could find, with the release of the Elysian Realm back in version 5 in August of 2021. The reason I say Hades is the most influential in pushing roguelike mode content into gacha games is because the Elysian Realm in HI3 wears its inspirations of Hades from a design standpoint on its sleeve without even trying. The linear progression of runs without any backtracking through multiple possible pathways, with clear rewards for clearing the room stated clearly before entering, the shop system, the permanent character upgrade system between runs, the adjustable modifiers before the start of new runs, the different playstyle options that can greatly influence how someone approaches combat gameplay, the progression of the game's story that happens between runs, but most importantly, and something that is consistent between a majority of these roguelike modes, is how character buffs acquired during runs are tied to an archetype or playstyle that improves the more the player accumulates buffs within that category. The Elysium Realm, for all intents and purposes, was a cheap imitation of Hades that was so well received within the Honkai Impact 3rd community that it jumpstarted the trend of roguelike content in gacha games. Continuing on in October 2021 with the limited time event Labyrinth Warriors in version 2.2 of Genshin Impact, acting as something as a testing grounds for Hoyoverse to experiment with the gameplay structure. Years later, we would see their second attempt at a roguelike mode with the Simulated Universe alongside the release of Honkai Star Rail in April of 2023, followed by the release of Wuthering Waves and its now discontinued interpretation of a roguelike with the Depths of Elusive Realm in May of 2024. Then, the Imaginarium Theater in Genshin Impact in version 4.7 in June 2024, and finally, with Hollow Zero in Zenless Zone Zero in July of 2024. All of these modes build upon the foundation set or sharing many elements from the Elysian Realm, which by extension was a clone of Hades. Yet despite this, none of these modes can ever hold a candle to the legendary roguelike game they took inspiration from, and in many cases, butchers the entire genre altogether in the same way the modern gacha scene has butchered open world design. Today, I have no interest in giving any of these modes the benefit of the doubt, as I hate all of them, and how they've been implemented into the player's account management by way of dangling rewards in front of them before a cycle resets. But if you want my quick opinions on them, Genshin's makes for some shit endgame content. Honkai Star Rails kept reinventing the wheel every 2 to 3 patches before I eventually stopped playing. Zenless Zone Zeros is currently the best out of the 4 because it literally just ripped Wuthering Waves' implementation wholesale, while Wuthering Waves themselves thought it would be a good idea to sunset its original mode, which was so well done, in favor of one of the most generic, garbage interpretations from these 4 games. I mean, come on, Kuro. Did you just forget how badly the TV mode in ZZZ was received? So why are you trying to copy their homework? Did no one tell you they got an F in class for that one? With that out of the way, I want to go over the problems I have with these modes that's inherently due to the nature of how gacha games have to butcher elements of video game genres for their business models and accessibility to work. The first issue with all of these roguelite modes is that the game mode is too easy a majority of the time. Roguelike games with gradual, permanent progression like Hades are inherently really hard for casual or amateur players at the start as you come to grips with the skill floor and difficulty scaling of the game. For most players, you will not complete your first run for multiple hours of playtime. With only the most experienced roguelike players or someone who gets really lucky with buffs and gear on a run can achieve their first clear early on in a new playthrough. That's not the case in gacha games. It only takes a half-decent team with investment equivalent to the recommended levels of the respective difficulty tier to clear in most cases. That's not to say there isn't exceptions to this rule. Cocolia from Honkai Star Rail and the Sentry Construct from Wuthering Waves can quite frankly go fuck themselves. But otherwise, most of the final bosses can be cleared without much thought put into your runs. The roguelike games are supposed to be a subgenre inspired by the 1980s game Rogue, which is regarded as a brutal, unforgiving experience. While roguelikes are nowhere near as difficult, they still retain a degree of challenge that's later smoothened out as the player becomes more familiar with the game's mechanics and unlocks permanent upgrades. The only time gacha roguelike modes become difficult is when you start applying the optional difficulty modifiers. But at that point, it just devolves into bullshit DPS checks once you remember that HSR has an enrage mechanic to prevent stalling, and ZZZ straight up has a timer that automatically fails you past 3 minutes and 30 seconds. This leads me into my second issue with roguelike modes. Significant permanent progression does not happen within the mode. Yes, there are skill trees in some of these modes that will improve your performance, but in terms of significance, they obviously pale in comparison to simply pulling for stronger characters and stronger weapons. As with every genre of game that gacha strip bare in service of their monetization systems, roguelikes do not work if you can just buy your way to victory before you've even started the run. Players with hyper-invested and pull-heavy accounts don't have to play by the rules of the roguelike formula. They don't have to manage their resources, they don't have to pick the right buffs, they don't have to respect the difficulty modifiers. Nothing matters after you've swiped that credit card. On the other end of the spectrum, failing a high difficulty run does not encourage players to better understand how to play the game mode, as in most cases, it was never their fault to begin with. The only alternative for players who cannot pull is to repeatedly reset their runs until they get a combination of buffs, equipment, and enemy lineups that actually synergize together to make a cohesive build instead of a bunch of random buffs that don't work together and brick your run. Speaking from personal experience, I've abandoned countless runs of Threshold Protocol 6 Divergent Universe in Honkai Star Rail, either because I was getting screwed over with buff options, or I'd get a boss I just couldn't clear. A run that I still recall to this day is when I couldn't get past the Something Unto Death boss after repeatedly restarting the fight until I eventually abandoned the run. Why did I have to abandon the run? Because I didn't own Black Swan, and the boss's imprison mechanic on higher Threshold Protocol difficulties would trap my characters way too quickly, and I had no way to free them fast enough and would wipe either from getting picked off, imprisoning my whole party, or stalling out for too long to trigger the enrage mechanic. Part of the appeal of roguelike games is playing a botched run to see how far you can get on your own personal skill expression, which in most cases is possible to do for experienced players. That is not the case in gacha games, as the ceiling for skill expression is oftentimes never enough to combat the artificial difficulty or absurd time limits without relying on god-tier runs or pulling more character copies. The next problem I want to point out with the roguelike mode is the weekly requirement to clear these modes for rewards. Completing dailies and spending stamina is one thing in a gacha game when you can just turn your brain off and effectively autopilot it for about 5 to 10 minutes a day. The roguelike modes, by comparison, can take upwards of an hour as you run through the same enemy and boss encounters, collecting the same buffs over and over at the start of every week. Let me make something clear. None of these modes in any of these gacha games has the same level of replayability and emergent gameplay that you would see from a traditional roguelike game. Yet despite this, these gachas want you to continually play these modes, and because most people are only compelled to complete these modes weekly for the rewards, they're likely only playing these at their lowest possible difficulty that still allows them to complete the reward track in a single run. So not only are they playing these every week because they have to, but they're also only ever engaging with this content at a mind-numbing difficulty level that further adds to the boredom and repetition. My heart goes out to anyone who pulled Acheron not to use her, but to dramatically cut down on time bloat when playing Simulated Universe. There is already plenty enough busy work FOMO content in any of these gacha games that we don't need to add another to the pile. I am sick of being compelled to play these modes when they're a primary source for weekly premium currency and standard banner pull tokens. The last issue I want to address with the roguelike modes of gacha is that there are too many gacha games making roguelike modes. Just among the big four alone, we already have roguelike modes in each of them, and quite frankly, I don't care about the differences in genre between Genshin, HSR, ZZZ, or WuWa when it comes to this absurd oversaturation we are seeing right now. I don't want to play a gacha game that just lifts entire subgenres wholesale from each other over and over and over again. And you can bet your ass at least some of the upcoming gacha games like Arknight's Enfield, Azure Permilia, Neverness to Everness, Ananta, or Silver Palace, to name a few, will try as well to implement their own roguelikes as well to perpetuate this oversaturation and homogenization of content offerings. Many of us started playing gacha games with Genshin Impact because it offered something new and groundbreaking we've never seen prior in the gacha space. Yet right now, it seems all these games want to do is go through game genres like a revolving door and copy each other after one of them makes an attempt at it. Seriously, do we really need every gacha game to make an auto chess clone? If you ask me, the answer is no. I want to see unique content that isn't just some copy-paste job from what their sibling game or direct competition decided to have a go at. I don't really have an elegant segue to wrap up all my thoughts on this subject matter. This has just been something that's been bothering me for a while now, and I just wanted to put it into a video. Roguelike as a genre is something I'm willing to dabble in occasionally, but I'm not a die-hard fan. With that being said, I find it incredibly frustrating to have to slog through these modes every single week in place of what could be something more interesting for each game to do. In my opinion, as of right now, only Zenless Zone Zero and maybe Honkai Star Rail have earned the right to keep their respective roguelike modes thanks to a higher quantity of content, and in the case of ZZZ, the ability to trial characters you don't own in the mode, and for the unique Hollow Zero gear that transforms how you play the character to spice things up. As for the other two, Wuthering Waves needs to get its shit together with its own roguelike content, and Genshin needs to get it through their thick skulls that none of their endgame content is even fun to play. That's all I really got to say. It's time to close the video out. And with that, I have said all I really wanted to about my frustration with roguelike mode content in modern gacha games. If you are someone who enjoys the roguelike content in these games, then more power to you. I won't take that enjoyment away from you. However, I would like to again stress just how much more these games could do when it comes to making unique, permanent content that stands out from the rest of the crowd. These games all play so dramatically different from one another, and in my opinion, that should remain consistent across their respective alternative game modes. I don't want to see this space become any more formulaic than it already is. I don't want these games to just be a handful of unique mechanics housed within the same foundation of content offerings as the next game after it. I want these games to capitalize on their unique gameplay offerings with content that lets said gameplay shine above the rest. I've already been hearing rumblings of Arknight's Enfield possibly having a roguelike mode itself, and with the recent changes shown off at the China Joy presentation of a more action-oriented game, it already looks like my most anticipated gacha this year is already falling into the trap of stagnation and homogenization. All I can really do is pray for the best and prepare for the worst. But until then, this has been Arikado Zodan, and I'm clocking out.